Hello and welcome to the webcast today, Go to Market with Power Platform, Considerations for Success. When we wrote the synopsis and the overview for this webcast, we basically said that Power Platform is just that, it's a platform. It's difficult to go to market with a Power Platform proposition to your customers. So how can you start to make money from Power Platform and its associated technologies? If you'd like to think about how you can go from Microsoft Dynamics 365 or Business Central to creating business applications in general, then you need to think outside of the product box and consider more broadly what can be delivered. So my name is Chris Parks, and I work with QBS Group and One Click Factory as a channel development manager. My original background was in software engineering. I worked as a developer for 5 years at a UK ISV, writing human resources and payroll software. That company was acquired by Great Plains, which became Dynamics GP when they were acquired by Microsoft. I transitioned then into Microsoft as a partner technology specialist for CRM version 1.2. It was the first international release of CRM way back in 2003. Then spent 17 years in a variety of technical sales, but mostly commercial channel roles in Microsoft UK before becoming independent in 2017. And for the last few years, I've been operating in a pseudo CSO role. By CSO, I mean Chief Simplification Officer, helping businesses succeed and grow by providing services to help them understand in simplified terms what Dynamics, and in particular, the Power Platform could mean for them. So with that in mind, let's help all of you on the call today understand more about Power Platform. Through the course of this webcast, we will cover the background and the history of Power Platform, helping you understand clearly what it is. I'll also show some examples of solutions that partners have created by using the Power Platform. You'll see a specific example of a model-driven app and also a Power BI app that are in use commercially, things that have fit into the market and already worked well for partners. I'll also talk about how you could consider monetizing the opportunity around Power Platform, what you'll need to consider when starting a successful Power Platform practice, and also provide insights into some useful resources that exist that will enable you to get started quickly and easily with little cost other than that of your time. Before we begin though, we do have some polls that I'd like you to help me understand your background as an audience. So with regards to the following questions, if we can display the polls, please. And from a Microsoft partner perspective, I'm looking to understand what is your primary business offering in the first instance. I promise this won't be one of those webcasts where I ask you to continue to revert back to polls. I just have 3 questions that I'd love to know more. I think I'm looking for the first question from a Microsoft partner perspective, and yeah. So from a CRM Power Platform background, question number 2 is around: do you have any experience with Power Apps to date? I'm aware that some of you will be starting from the ground up, whereas some of you may have considerable experience. Question number 3 is: have you already built a successful Power Apps go-to-market proposition? And loving the kind of the 10% of the audience that are saying yes, they already have. So they're going to ask me some tough questions. Very happy that nobody says that they're not sure this is the right call for them. Obviously, the vast majority, 90%, saying that's why they're here today. When it comes to having experience with Power Apps to date, we have a mix between none and a little bit, but we need to know more. There's only a couple of you on the call that have good experience or are technical experts and are wondering how to package this up. And then from the product perspective, you know, your product background, 65% are from a Business Central background. I'll cover some specific things today for Business Central partners, so that's good to know. The 30% that are Power Platform partners and finance supply chain management partners will understand the Dataverse possibly more already, so please bear with me when I talk about Business Central connectors to benefit most of those on the call. So thank you for filling that in. That is really helpful. I think what I'd like to first say, so knowing that the majority of you have yet to go to market with Power Platform, Also, I'm assuming there, you serve the SMB market with Business Central, and it's kind of the majority of the audience. I want to share something that's become very apparent outside of the enterprise. And this might seem strange given the title of this session, but I'm going to help you understand over the next kind of 45 minutes or so why, except in very specific circumstances, you should not ever, never go to market with Power Platform. In my opinion, it's because if you do try to go to market with a Power Platform proposition, then it's very likely indeed that you will fail. And there's a specific reason and a specific thought process behind this. And it probably will seem obvious once I've stated it, but fundamentally, the Power Platform is impossible to accurately define in a simple sentence. Even on Microsoft's own website, the explanation given doesn't even start to answer the question, what is Power Platform? I did a search for it. This is what Microsoft describe it as. So good luck if you decide to offer such a thing to your customers. Hey there, customer of mine, how would you like to empower everyone at your organization with intuitive, collaborative, and extensible platform of low-code tools that makes it easy to create efficient and flexible solutions? I can imagine the response that you would get from your customer if you tried that. Yes, stand aside, please stop wasting my time. I'm busy trying to run my business and overcome a few challenges I'm facing right now. And the Power Platform proposition from Microsoft is a direct to customer message, and it's still evolving. And it's always been specifically an enterprise pitch from the day that it started. So I don't think you really can go to market with a message that says, we do Power Platform. I think that would be particularly destined to fail. So before we can consider how we can go to market with Power Platform, we need to ensure that we understand the component parts, and specifically which of those are of most interest for Dynamics partners and why they should be of interest also, more importantly. Some of you have CRM experience, and that's great because you will already be familiar with the Dataverse. And for me, that's one of the main areas of interest for Dynamics partners. So Dataverse and connectors are absolutely key. I think the other areas that I talk to partners mostly about are Power Apps, and also Power Automate, and finally Power BI. Those are the kind of the key ones where it's easier to get to market more quickly and easily. I'm not saying that Power Virtual Agents or the AI Builder technologies in there are not of interest. I mean, for certain scenarios, if a customer wants to use robotic process automation, RPA, for example, in Power Automate, and integrate that within invoice processing using AI Builder, so artificial intelligence builder, to automate a process, then it's valid for that scenario, absolutely. With Power Virtual Agents here, the technology is real. Don't get me wrong, there's an opportunity to create virtual chatbots using visual design scenarios. However, please be aware that the licensing costs associated with these technologies, so for AI Builder, credits start at a minimum of $500 a month, that's 420 euros. That's before you consider Power Apps and Power Automate licenses or Dynamics 365 licenses to go with that. For Power Virtual Agent, it's 843 euros a month minimum, $1,000 minimum per month. So if you're going to use those respectively Power Virtual Agents, you're looking at a minimum of $12,000 per year, 6,000 for AI Builder credits in licensing costs before you charge for your services or your software. So your customer there will have the licensing overhead. And it's worth mentioning that here because I think those costs have previously gone under the radar. I've seen partners create some fantastic kind of integrated chatbots to check stock and do all sorts of great things before realizing the limited scope of their customers who are comfortable with that licensing position from Microsoft. So I'm not saying negate AI Builder and Power Virtual Agents. I just think the value is in the Dataverse, the connectors, Apps Automate, and Power BI. So if we focus on those parts today, and let's start with the Dataverse. It's something that originally had its origins back in the early 2000s when Microsoft embarked on an acquisition trail for ERP. They bought Great Plains, Navision, Exapta, Solomon Software in the US. They also wrote in-house Dynamics CRM around that time, there was a concept that was known as Project Green inside of Microsoft. And the idea behind that was to create one centralized consolidated data store that all Microsoft business applications would use. Unfortunately, at that time, the product groups at Microsoft worked across different time zones, geographies. Such a task was nigh on impossible. Obviously, they didn't have the technologies to work and collaborate virtually that we take for granted today available to them back then. However, finally in early 2016, Microsoft released something known as the Common Data Model. That evolved into the Common Data Service, the Common Data Service for apps, if you're from the kind of modern workplace side, which was then rebranded as the Dataverse in 2020. It was a marketing name change only at that time. The underlying technology remained the same. So not only have Microsoft created this Dataverse to serve their own business applications, you should also understand that there are different types of connectors available. Currently, there are over 500 connectors to other cloud-based apps, platforms. Please note that many of the connectors to the Dataverse specifically are listed as premium connectors rather than standard connectors for the purposes of Power Platform, which brings additional licensing costs again. Given that 70% nearly now of the audience have stated they're from a Business Central background, you'll probably all be waiting now for me to state the obvious. Business Central is still the odd business application out in Microsoft terms. It doesn't base itself on the Dataverse. It has its own separate means of data storage. And right now, we're not aware of any plans for Microsoft to fundamentally re-platform Business Central anytime soon. So they are continually working on ways to integrate between Dataverse and Business Central to cater for those needs. And what we thought it might be worthwhile sharing today is a few of those options and a few of those component parts and things that are a few of those integration options that enable you to connect those component parts. The 5 ways in which we identified are data synchronization, virtual tables, data flows, Power Automate or Azure Logic Apps, kind of like the big brother to Power Automate Azure Logic Apps is, or connector based. The key to it is that these all have different pros and cons, reason why you should, reasons why you shouldn't, to integrate to Business Central. And if you think about the data synchronization stuff, it's option 1, the primary option. It can be driven through Business Central. You can use the user interface. You can set up the data synchronization in there. So in theory, it's really simple. And you can do native table mapping. You can do that at the Power Platform level. You can do that with extended table integration out of the box if you use Dynamics 365 for sales, for example. But there are some weaknesses with it. If you want to add extra tables or fields, you're going to need knowledge of AL in order to achieve that. It's not well suited to handle conflict resolution. So the country code GB or UK, for example, wouldn't synchronize. It would throw conflicts out. It also works on a schedule. It's not live. It doesn't kind of do it on an ad hoc basis. So it's scheduled. So, with that in mind as option number 1, kind of the second option that most partners look at is virtual tables, which is great because that does provide real-time integration. It helps in that there's one master table, so there is no conflicts. There are more tables available, obviously, from a virtual tables perspective, but then on the downside there, because the data is not synchronized into both places, you're not going to be able to trigger Power Automate flows based on data in Dataverse. Also, it wouldn't work with Power Apps portals if you wanted to go down that route. And it's the same across all of these options. There are positives and negatives to all of them. Data flows, great. You've got one master. You've got native table mapping. It's config only. You don't need to use code. But then it's one directional only. It works on a schedule. It's not the best from a performance perspective. And Power Automate and Logic Apps, really kind of powerful here, bi-directional. It can be low code, no dev. You could probably do more using Power Automate and Azure Logic Apps from a technology perspective. But the downside is you need to write all of the logic yourselves. And therefore, you also need to maintain that logic and the engine over time as Microsoft changed things. So would that be the best option? And it comes down to kind of often to the scenario that's best suited. I think just to cover off the connector-based stuff, you can connect to BC directly, fantastic. You can build low code for mobile apps, great. But the out-of-the-box connector has limitations. You can create your own connectors, but also you're limited to the APIs that are supported for Business Central tables and fields. And we've also found through our kind of efforts to integrate with Canvas apps there is quite a level of complexity. So we find that often on a scenario by scenario basis, when you're connecting to Business Central, when you think about your scenarios, these are the options, and each have good points and bad points. So you need to consider your scenarios in turn. So 1, 3, and 4 would be where the data could be stored in both Business Central and Dataverse. It would be in 1 for sure. The other thing to bear in mind, Microsoft allow you the privilege, if you choose to do data synchronization, to store the data in both places, which means you get to pay for the storage twice to keep the same data in sync, once in Business Central, once in Dataverse. So again, bear that in mind. So the kind of Business Central specific piece has been covered there. Next up, we should also understand Power Apps, which drive the end user experience for the Power Platform. There are actually 3 different types of Power Apps that can be created: Canvas apps, model-driven apps, and Power Apps portals. Power Apps portals are an evolution of Dynamics 365 portals. It's a product that was acquired by Microsoft in 2015. It was known as ADX Studio. Really, it's outside the scope of today. It's safe to say that they can be used to provide access to data that resides in Dataverse, and they can provide access to that data externally. So if you're a membership organization and you want to share kind of details of finances, upcoming dates, all those sorts of things on a kind of authorized user perspective, you can do that through Power Apps portals. You can also use it as a blank kind of web-facing portal for unauthorized access. But if you want to use portals and you want to use data from Dataverse, you have to have the data synchronized from Business Central into there, as kind of explained a little bit before. Canvas apps are apps that can be created without using the Dataverse as the back end. To be clear, you can design them from a blank canvas, hence the name. You can add and create controls to drive data capture. I think the significant thing here, you would need to handle all of the back end data connection and validation logic yourselves, should you choose to go down the Canvas apps without Dataverse route. For me, and I think for most Dynamics partners who come from a database-oriented background, model-driven apps are usually what is most of interest. Many of you will already be familiar with Microsoft apps, Dynamics 365 for sales, for customer service, marketing, field service, and so on. They are actually examples of model-driven apps, albeit first-party apps published from Microsoft directly. So what model-driven apps provide, combined with the Dataverse, because the two go hand in hand, is the ability for you as partners to create your own apps. You get to use the same familiar look and feel of the Microsoft Publish apps to create and capture the data. The data is stored in Dataverse. You can handle specific business requirements for your customers and logic in there. I don't want to do the technology a disservice by kind of comparing it to Visual Basic Form Design of old, but it's something that sticks in my mind that was really simple, or Microsoft Access, for example, from a kind of end user perspective for accessing database. But that really is where Power Apps can be used instead of those types of technology. Microsoft positioned Power Platform as low code, no code, rather than pro code. And for me, Power Apps is where you can start to take your customers' extended needs and make them a reality by providing custom apps. Think of the expression, there's an app for that. It's been around as long as the iPhone, at least. If you translate it into there's a business app for that, then you're on the right lines about what you can do with Power Apps and model-driven apps. Because all of the underlying data platform and the user interface is taken care of by the Power Platform in model-driven apps, there's also less of a need for long-term maintenance of your solutions. The apps also render well, excellently, to be honest, across all devices and platforms. So Android phones, iPad, iPhones, traditional browser-based access is all handled by the kind of platform itself. Next up, we said there was Power Automate, formerly known as Flow. And this brings workflow and automation to the platform. There's lots of different scenarios you can use here, from routine email approvals through checking data settings within Dataverse and firing off actions from certain triggers. The scope of what you can do with Power Automate is quite comprehensive. Power Automate for desktop is what you would use for robotic process automation, but Power Automate for web is what you would, again, be mostly interested in as Dynamics partners. If you were looking to drive integration scenarios, think about a custom solution, request for holidays, read from Azure Active Directory, manager, line manager, send for approval, new invoice to be approved. All those types of things are things that you can use Power Automate for. I think finally, Power BI here, it's something that you should all already be familiar with. If not, it's about data-driven graphical reports. It's about dashboards, KPIs, key performance indicators. I'm not going to dwell on it here because I'll show an example shortly. And I think when it comes to Power BI, there's a saying, a picture paints 1,000 words. If I show you what a partner has actually done with Power BI, then that will help you understand much more easily than I could ever explain. So now that we understand the component parts of Power Platform, we can go back to the go-to-market question. And we also understand now, hopefully, why we can't answer it easily. Power Platform is a collection of technologies that enable data storage, process automation, user interaction within the context of business processes and applications. If we think of the key things that you need to define to be able to effectively go to market, these would be more aligned to knowing your target market, having a clear value proposition, an effective pricing structure, and finally, kind of a comprehensive sales plan or route to market defined. So given that we also know that Power Platform can pretty much be anything to anybody and everything to everybody, it's not the kind of thing that you can easily position and sell to your customers. As I said earlier, if you do that, then if you decide to do so, then really good luck with that. Apologies, slide skipped ahead. There we go. So in my experience and what I found through working with partners, that in order to be successful, if you're going to go to market with Power Platform, you need to consider a few very simple but important things. What and who do you have in your existing customer base that you can leverage to try and identify quick wins and kind of define key messaging? If you sell to an industry vertical, then so much the better. If you've got a core of customers that have these specific horizontal needs, so much the better. So think about how you're going to approach your customers with that messaging. It shouldn't be by Power Platform apps, but it could be, it should be something aligned to the value-added intellectual property that you can position to your customers that address their pains. So, if I think of a horizontal example, every organization tends to have HR. How many of those organizations still don't have effective or still using paper-based records for accidents in the workplace or similar things where, digitization of that, you're going to remove the paper trail. You're not going to, you're basically going to digitize it so you can get more effective reporting. That's a kind of an example of a horizontal solution where you could talk to a customer and you could define a Power App for. I think you also need to think about how you charge for project services and apps and solutions that you're going to create. So are you going to deliver one-off engagements, something that most Dynamics partners are used to doing from a project services perspective, or are you going to look to build repeatable IP that you can then position and sell to more customers, which would drive annuity revenue potentially? Maybe price it on a per user per month basis. That way it aligns with the Power Apps licensing and the kind of the messaging from Microsoft. And then if you do build repeatable IP, you think about your route to market. Are you going to purely sell direct? Would you like to try and enable a channel to sell your applications? bringing value to both them and yourselves? Will you target new markets? And if so, how can you scale that through commercial marketplaces? You need to reach new customers, you need to reach new partners. So what are the options that are out there? Obviously, Microsoft App Source is a marketplace that will give you kind of end customer exposure. There is a marketplace provided by QBS and One Click Factory that has partners as the channel there. So that's a potential opportunity for your solutions also. I think finally and most importantly, you need to ensure that you've got the right people within your organization aligned to work these things through. The right resources in order for you to be able to achieve your goals. So I also said that I would show some examples that we have in market today as part of this call. Now I want to give you some pointers here so that you can actually review these yourselves later in more detail. But I will cover a few of them. So on the Microsoft site, you'll find many examples. I've selected a few here from the low-code value prop deck that they've put together. I've gone through it. There's probably about 25 in the deck. You can read through them in your own time if you're seeking inspiration. But I've highlighted a few specifics that should be of interest. One of them shows automated invoice processing in the context of AI Builder, as I've explained, and there's another one that talks about consolidated financial management and how that was done from a Power Apps perspective. So those are two kind of ERP examples. There's also a CRM Lite example. And this is the most interesting story here that I've found. The company in question is a company called ForceWorks, and the CEO. So a while back in the Microsoft licensing guide, it used to say that if you wrote functionality that mirrored or replicated things that Microsoft created, then the customer also had to buy the license for the Microsoft product as well as the product that you were positioning in market. So there were some professional services automation partners that obviously were bitten by this, who had a PSA solution built on top of CRM, which is now the backbone is Dataverse. Microsoft actually took that out sometime around about 18 months ago, I want to say. And ForceWorks basically wrote a CRM Lite application, so kind of sales and marketing service, and published it on AppSource. Now, their CEO made the decision to make that solution available free of charge. And this is that seems counterintuitive. It seems counterintuitive to me, and it may seem counterintuitive to many of you on this call. They've written some software and they are giving it away for free. But the justification given was that no one ever uses the solution without needing to customize the processes that live behind the scenes or create new ones or capture additional data. So the end customer reach through AppSource, and then the generation of new business inquiries to provide services and support longer term has increased because of that decision to give that away for free. So that's a really interesting example of kind of something that's been put out there in market, developed on top of Power Apps, and seen a commercial return. There may be QBS partners on this call, as well as ones that work with One Click Factory. It's probably worth mentioning that if you've got a QBS membership, you do have access to a CRM Lite type offering through your partner benefits. It's known as Jumpstart 365 for Sales. It's available as a model-driven app through Cloud Partner Panel. You can use it as is. You can customize and extend it for your needs however you want to. So if you're looking for inspiration from Microsoft around where to get started with your Power Platform proposition, that's the place to begin. There's also a lot of their go-to-market resources there on the site. The collateral is very generic. You could use it for your marketing efforts, but of course it talks about empowering everyone within customers. So that might not be quite so useful. So what I'd like to do also is show you some specific examples with partners that I work with in the UK, the ones that I've got first-hand knowledge of. I want to start with a model-driven app example from a UK partner called Strategy 365. And so bear with me. this slide will advance in a moment, hopefully. And there we go, great. So what Strategy 365 did was create a purchase order lifecycle management model-driven app for one of their customers. It was an end-to-end business management solution. It was built entirely on the Power Platform using Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. And it solved their customers' business critical needs. Fundamentally, the solution does three things. It handles purchase order generation and lifecycle management from quote to cash. It integrates with third-party timesheet software and also a third-party scanning solution. And it provides full project profitability reporting through Power BI. Now, when I talk about this and show it to ERP partners and Business Central partners, they realize that this is very close to kind of ERP territory. And this is more of a financial system than something that you would consider CRM or Power Apps. And I think this is why it's interesting to understand the decisions made to create this as a Power App project. So, why did they create this outside of the finance system? Well, primarily, the core users of the system are not finance professionals. They're project and contract managers. So the tools needed to be more front office focused than back office. They also needed to be really simple and intuitive to use. They needed to be built to suit specific business needs, but also allow for flexibility where users needed to, so the users needed to be part of the finance function, but they didn't need to have access to any of the financial data within the business. And it also needed to be cost effective from a licensing perspective. So Power Apps, not just being low code, but also low cost to license was a significant factor for the customer making the decision here. Now, by implementing the kind of the process, and it was driven through kind of email integration and automation, as well as the model-driven Power App. The benefits to the customer were easily quantifiable. So the new Power App significantly reduced manual errors and rework. They used automation wherever possible to avoid manual processing. There was no rekeying of data in multiple systems, so they removed manual errors from the processes. They digitized the entire paper trail. So they took delays out where paperwork was sat on desks in offices waiting to be signed off. And the impact of that during the pandemic, it can't be understated. People could work from wherever they were based without having to change how they worked. Then finally, the near real-time visibility on total costs and project profitability enabled them to make business decisions in a more timely manner, and rather than waiting on information from reports that previously needed to be produced manually by the finance team, that was available. So it was available kind of ready and at hand. So overall, the customer saw a huge reduction in overall admin overheads and mistakes through bringing this automation to their workforce. They estimated that it enabled the customer to grow revenues 50% in the first year with no increase in headcount. So pretty significant. They estimate that it saved the customer over £100,000 in direct costs, whilst also enabling that fully mobile workforce. So productivity was maximized across the entire business. Minimize the COVID disruption for sure. So I hope those things highlight for you significant measures when it comes to generating a clear return on investment from customers, making their first foray into Power Apps and Power Platform. And from a go-to-market perspective, that solution is targets a very specific business need. It's purchase order lifecycle management. And that's the kind of thing, is if you're going to go to market with Power Platform, go to market with purchase order lifecycle management, not Power Platform. Noticed a comment in the chat. Hello to everybody who's typed in there. Very appreciated. A comment from Jason Bettridge. Will these slides be shared, please? I'm assuming that's the same Jason Bettridge, who is the MD or CEO of Circle in the UK. And I talked about a Power BI example that I mentioned. It's another UK partner. I've worked closely with these guys for the long term, but at least since their inception as Circle in the UK. The And so I absolutely love this example as well. And I wanted to show it to you as part of a partner showcase, because I'm sure that almost everyone on this call understands what's needed to run a sales process with sales teams. And then once it's closed, to deliver projects within the agreed timeframes. It's the core of what we as Microsoft partners do for our customers. And what Circle have created is a business dashboard with a heads-up display, like on a flight deck, all the information at hand that they use to run the business day to day for both sales, excuse me, for both sales and projects. They've also integrated their finance data to pull through additional PCs on invoicing, which enables them to see many details from the top line down to individual project level insights. And if you look on the left-hand side here of the slide, the Power BI app on the slide, you can see the comprehensive amount of reports that have been created for their CEO to manage his business. And of course, the data you are looking at has been randomized and anonymized for the purpose of these screenshots. We're not giving away any trade secrets here. It's still a great example, even with the demo data in. What I particularly love about this is some of the specifics around project and resource reporting. As we all know, one of the major risks when running projects, it's overrun, the risk of burn, as it can also be known, where project delivery takes longer than the estimated original timeframes. It could be down to anything, scope creep through ever-evolving customer requirements, disconnect between individual customer contacts, can all kind of drive out the scope of a project. And the dashboard that Circle have designed to run their business takes all of this into account as a major consideration. They use individual dashboards to drill down into from the heads-up display, and they can use that to manage and monitor overall project progress, even down to the individual employee and timesheet level. So the reason, again, I wanted to show this is an example of a specific Power BI app. It's not a Power Apps app. This is completely created in Power BI with data integration. So I wanted to highlight this to you all as well, because there's a separate potential opportunity here, especially when selling to kind of C-level executives. This type of informational insights app really does have impact for them. I know when I was at Microsoft, and I did a stint as kind of a business intelligence partner, technology strategist, it was we did a great job of telling the BI story, so much so that the Dynamics partners that I knew from my time in Dynamics were always asking me to go out and present that to their future prospects, mainly because they knew it had the power to sell the app, and that the impactful nature of KPIs and dashboards are what a business is actually after if you start with the end in mind, and it's something that their existing system is probably not providing. So I would encourage you all, when you do go to market, to include Power BI in there. Power BI is not something that you will find that you can partner with somebody to deliver Power BI, but you can't really outsource Power BI, because there's a lot of consulting that needs to go on with the end users in the business to deliver that kind of service, much more so than you could outsource the creation of app in a specification to a kind of a separate service provider. So the next thing that I thought we should also think about is how you go about spotting opportunity within your customer base. So, you don't go to market with Power Platform. You understand what the component parts are. You've seen examples of model-driven apps and Power BI apps that can capture data, and it's not easy to show kind of the process automation behind the scenes, but it's there. So how do you spot an opportunity? And for me, it's really, really simple. Usually, where there are multiple people involved in a process that includes Excel, then you've got a potential scenario to build a Power App and leverage Power Automate. Whether that data is being exported from the finance system, whether it's being manipulated, changed, rekeyed somewhere else, whether they've got reporting sat on top of that Excel database, there is generally a kind of a mix between structured and unstructured data here. And the structured data tends to get captured within Excel. So it's the same for SharePoint and SharePoint lists, where customers have often built business processes around information in SharePoint lists. Anywhere where you find that kind of technology being used or being overused in a way that it probably wasn't designed for, you've got a really good opportunity to have a conversation with your customer about creating a business app for that. Same goes for anything legacy. Anything that's in Microsoft Access, for example, is a prime candidate to have a conversation about Power Apps. You've just got to get good at kind of understanding and spotting those opportunities to enable you to have those conversations. So I'm just going to take a quick look, because it does look like there's some questions coming in just before I go on to considerations and making how potentially to make money. Okay, so some really good questions. Where does Circle pull the data from? Multiple different sources is the answer there. It seems like it's difficult to standardize Power Apps offerings. Do you agree? Will make it difficult to monetize, I guess. That's a great question because basically, Jason's answered the question there for me. From Dynamics, Sage, Power Apps, and Excel, from the data for the dashboards. Is it difficult to standardize? And it leads well into this slide, actually, because the way you're going to make money out of Power Apps, obviously there's licenses and there's some margin there, but there's not that much unless you do volume. Obviously, they are lower cost licenses, and therefore you make the same percentage margin, but you've got to do volume in order to make any margin. There is services opportunities, and I know that's the bread and butter of many partners. It's a really good opportunity for services into your customer base. So that's there. And in relation to standardizing offerings, I think about templated IP. And I think about if you can create IP that's repeatable, that fits within a market segment or a vertical process, then you have something that you can develop once and deploy multiple times. So as well as having the services and the project services that go along, if you can get to a point where you can license your own intellectual property, then that's the real way to make money and drive annuity revenue from providing those solutions to your customers. You can tie it back into a proposition that brings clear ROI, and you can also give examples of that clear ROI. Hence the purchase order lifecycle management example that I gave. Quantifiable ROI on costs. We created this solution for this customer who had this process in this industry, and we were able to drive efficiency, save costs, all of those things. That's the proposition that you will need to go to market with Power Platform. You could create multiple solutions, solution after solution. You could create one solution, deploy it many times, and that's the kind of key. Also, when I talked about ForceWorks opportunity, one solution, publish on AppSource, drives more customer engagements. So is it difficult to standardize offerings? No, not if you have a clear idea of the offerings that you want to get out to market in mind before you begin. If you just start making lots and lots of apps, then all you're going to create is for yourself lots and lots of maintenance headaches and potential additional ongoing services opportunities within customers. But bear in mind that 1,000 apps need 1,000 people to keep them up to date, to understand, to change them as the customer's process changes, and so on and so forth. I can't answer the question about Monday's development for the professional services dashboard app. I think it's ongoing and has been since it started. And it's a really good question, Hans. Thank you for that, because if you're going to get started, it's the old saying, if you're going to write a best-selling novel, what is the first thing you've got to do? And the answer is start. Likewise, if you're going to create kind of a wonderful dashboard with a heads-up display on to run your business off, you've got to start. And the first thing you've got to do is you've got to identify the key performance indicators, the key metrics that you want to understand. And from there, everything else will evolve. So I don't think there's a number of man days that I could give as an answer to that, mainly because it is always evolving and always ongoing. And I think that's why there's a real opportunity in Power BI from partners for a service perspective. And I'm not sure I understand the question from Andre there as well. So apologies if you want to put a bit more clarity, and I can try and help. So when it comes to your Power Platform practice and considerations, I think these are the things that you need to think about. The scope. If you're in Business Central right now, think outside of the Business Central box. Think about things that you ordinarily wouldn't have users of a finance system doing. Timesheets, project expenses, things that would more naturally be done in other tools. And think if there's a Power Apps and a Power Automate process there that you can surround the ERP system with. Think about then your skill set and your background. So the people on the call, if I just duck back to the polls, and your background experience is 63% of your Business Central. Actually, with the, so we're kind of over 70% Business Central with a combination of the others. If you do have a CRM and a Power Platform, a CRM background, or Dynamics, then or even F&S CM now as well, because that's been moved to the Dataverse for quite some time for the core entities, although it is slightly different. If you don't have a background in CRM, then you probably need to think about training staff up and getting staff skilled there. Everybody can do database design in theory, but understanding how to then translate that into Dataverse and apps is a key part. Next up, the thing you want to consider is cloud economics, and whether or not you want to go down that route of just delivering project services, or you want to create IP that you want to repeat template out. I think what I will say here as well is that from a IP protection point of view, because this is key, Microsoft have a license management capability. It's still relatively new to market, and it's based on a few things. It predicates that you must have your app deployed via app source. So that's one thing, which means that it's a kind of a two customer play. And you must provide the Power Apps licenses that correspond with that. Then they can provide you with license management. It's really difficult to protect kind of the solution once you've deployed it. And we've talked about maybe you want a license per user per month on some of these solutions. Well, what happens if the customer decides that they're not going to pay? How, contractually you can enforce it, but technically, is there anything you can do? So also from a kind of a QBS perspective, from a membership perspective, there's something called the Cloud Partner Panel, which could help with that. You can never delete the data in these apps. Let's be completely clear: the data belongs to the customer. So if you wrote an app and published it and the customer used it, the data belongs to them. It's in their tenant. But it would help with callbacks to say, only allow the app to run in read-only mode. Don't allow update. Don't allow delete, and don't allow create news. You can kind of enforce that kind of protection through using some of the tools in the QBS toolbox. So also bear that in mind. Finally, we start getting to the end now. I want to talk about some resources that will enable you to kind of get started. And for those of you in the audience that are more technical, if you're pre-sales or consulting, one of the great things that's available to you is the Power Apps Developer Plan. It's an evolution of the old Community Plan. It's been rebranded. It's been updated with some features which originally restricted the use. Provides a free developer environment. So you can develop, you can test apps. It includes all of the premium connectors. It includes custom connectors. It includes Dataverse. You also get access to Power Automate for non-production building and testing of apps. You could use your internal use rights that Microsoft provide. So anybody with a Microsoft Action Pack subscription or higher will have internal use rights for Dynamics 365 CE. It's still in there, still in the partner benefits as CE last time I checked. But really, the developer plan could be better. It's granted to individuals within organizations, so you can have multiple people. With one, it gives you 2 gig of storage per developer, so you can create kind of two instances. It's free of charge, That's the absolute benefit. So you can sign up multiple people within your organization. You're not going to use your internal use rights. You're not going to get additional storage and costs associated with it and build there. So that developer plan is really kind of powerful. And if you wanted to check out the QBS, the Jumpstart 365 for Sales app that I mentioned earlier, get that working with Cloud Partner Panel, or just start creating your own apps from scratch, that really is the great way to start. Just a quick look back at the questions now. What are the ways to protect the IP of the solution building cloud platform? I think I already answered that question, and I didn't see the question. So, Vides, that is probably the best question on there. You might have typed that just before I saw it. Models and best practices to come from an unmanaged app from one client to other standards with the same needs. Yes, there are lots of best practices. Another good question, Hans, thank you. There are lots of best practices in there, and too many to cover in this session. It's not a best practice session. It was more around kind of go to market and trying to help you understand the thought process behind kind of Power Platform and what you could do with it. So I'll come back to that in a moment as to how One-Click Factory and QBS can help with those best practices. So to close, I did say, unless there are very specific circumstances, then you don't go to market with Power Platform. If you're looking to provide the types of service around application creation, around kind of migrations, around best practice, around helping people kind of get to grips with Power Platform, then you can go to market with Power Platform. Companies that offer those sorts of things, QBS Group, One-Click Factory, for example, we can go to market with a we can help you with Power Platform proposition, because it's the outsourced development model, which the majority of you here today, you kind of know, but that's not your model. So if we close and recap, and don't go to market with Power Platform, do go to market with differentiation and value. What do you have in your existing customer base that you can leverage to try and identify quick wins and key messaging? How are you going to approach your customers with that messaging? Not by Power Apps, by Power Platform. Put it into the vertical market or horizontal context of that IP. Be sure that you're aligned and you've got the right resources allocated to create that. Remember that Microsoft are only ever going to put more and more into the platform. You think back to the days when, as an ISV, you would have to write your own reporting engine, then SQL reporting services, then Power BI, kind of superseded that. When you had to write your own web front-end portal, all of a sudden you've got SharePoint for internal, you've got Power Apps portals for external. These things go into the platform and stay the course. So the Power Platform is only going to get bigger from this point forward. Dataverse is only going to get more kind of functionally capable, technically capable. So make a start, and if you're going to make a bet on the platform, then the Power Platform is quite possibly the right thing. So projects and services, IP, and value-added licensing are the three ways in which you will hopefully make money if you can define differentiation. So I think the final piece here, it leans back to best practices and the question from Hans, which is great. If you need help getting started, then do follow up with us afterwards. We've got a selection of services available that can help with learning and initial concepts. And Hans, in particular, app in a week here. So one of the package services we've got, we will do the app in a day training that Microsoft have kind of made available free of charge. It's just tech training. It doesn't talk about the context of your business. It doesn't understand your scenario. It's just dumb tech training. So we've created the idea of app in a week, which is kind of 40 hours worth of service. That's designed to help partners get started with the Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, Dataverse, with the intention of explicitly helping them understand how to create and package resaleable IP. So it's working in the context of solutions within Power Apps, for example. It's helping understand how to deploy that. It's helping understand all of the things that go around it. The idea is that we can understand the context of your business, we can provide you with the technical learnings, and during the time period of the kind of 40-hour engagement over a number of weeks, you can create your own proof of concept. You try, you learn, you make mistakes. We kind of go through the process again with you. We help, we consult, really to get you from we don't know where to start to we've got a minimum viable product that we could potentially put in market. So that up in a week service, contact your territory representative, please, there, partner success manager, whoever it is, if you're interested in that. I'd love to have another conversation with you afterwards. We've got something called CRM in a box. This is it's a kind of a 20-hour service, I think. Once you've got that app in place, or you've got the idea of an app, the next thing you've got to think about is how to configure and set up the customer's tenant. You need to think about security profiles, AD authentication, kind of business units, the whole setup. And that can be something, again, you can make mistakes, and it's something that with a little bit of experience and a helping hand in your customers' tenants, you can soon become super efficient about creating those, setting those up, and working through it. We could do that with you for your customer each and every time. We could help you understand how to do that. If you're not taking advantage of your internal use rights, you've got kind of minimum 10 gig of Dataverse storage and the ability to run the Microsoft apps and the Power Apps. You could also use it to configure that. We could specifically look at sales and service as well with you, if there was a need to think about customer service queues and sales processes. And then we've got the CRM migration assessment. So if you've got customers that are still running legacy on premises, less relevant in CRM than it is in Business Central, because it's been a cloud-first motion. CRM has for 11 years now. It's 2011 when it first went online. But there's still an opportunity there for us to work with you on the scope of migrating those customers to clouds too. And we can help there with the project services. We not just migration from Microsoft, we've also got replatforming services. If you've got customers that are running HubSpot or Pipedrive, if there's no connectors for Dataverse and they want to switch over to Dynamics and Power Platform, we can help there also. I think finally, it's probably worth mentioning the project delivery services that we have. So this is development projects, both from a low code, no code perspective and a pro code perspective. So low code, no code is designed to help with Power Apps and CRM solutions, with the intention of kind of scaling capacity for you where you don't have the resource available, or you don't really want to commit to skilling yourselves if you're more from the modern workplace side of the fence. Pro Code Service is designed to help partners offer professional development on top of the Power Platform. So if you need to create PCF controls, Power App Component Framework, if memory serves me right, these are kind of bespoke solutions that you can drop into model-driven apps and similar. So we can provide the high-level development capability there if the in-house resource doesn't exist. We've got in-house experts who've been doing this for quite some time, and kind of know these things inside out. So also opportunities there. So there's kind of 2 minutes to go. I've been answering the questions as I go along. Thank you, everybody, for putting the really excellent questions in there. Some great things. Very much appreciate it. I'm looking just to see if there's any more. There's a lot of highs in the chat. I think I've answered most of the questions in there. So I hope the session helped you gain a good understanding of why you shouldn't go to market with Power Platform, but instead think of your customer base, identify scenarios outside of Business Central, and start to provide additional value projects, services, and repeatable IP for them to succeed and grow, remaining their trusted advisor for business applications. So with that, I want to say thank you all for your time today. I want to hope this session's been valuable. If you've enjoyed it, please do provide feedback. I'd love to hear from you. cparkes@qbsgroup.com. Will find me also on LinkedIn. If you want to share a few words, if the things that I didn't answer, I'd also be more than willing to talk to you and follow up with you afterwards. So once again, thanks for your time. I know it's valuable. I appreciate you spending this hour with and listening to me. Take care, stay safe. And I hope to hear from you very soon.